Miami's offense looks to be a priority at training camp. What are they working on, and what do they hope to change? We'll break down all of the latest news from the Bahamas on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and subscribe on YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're going to talk a little bit more about what the Heat need to work on offense at training camp, and we could start with this quote from Erik Spoelstra. We've got another quote from Jimmy Butler that we'll get to later on about three-point shooting, but here's what Spo said about increasing the team's three-point shooting volume and how it's part of what they need to do, and then he added that the Heat didn't do enough last season to make them hard to guard. So here's the exact quote. He goes, quote, "And also not doing enough to make it hard to guard, but will be intentional there. Efficiency, being hard to guard, those are two things we're talking about. Generating more uncontested open shots is very important. And knowing how we can do that within what we do, that'll be something that we've been working on." David, the Heat ranked at the top of the league in mid-range shooting frequency. It's something that we talk about all the time on this show. It's just way over-indexed there. They're upside down on the math. They rank near the middle of the league in three-point shooting frequency. So what did you make of Spo's comments?
I mean, a very cautious hallelujah, because this is exactly what we've been talking about. And we saw signs of this in media day. We're starting to hear grumblings about it from camp. Like, this is obviously a priority. And if you're a Heat fan, this is as optimistic as you can possibly be when you hear something like this as directly from Erik Spoelstra. There is a little, hedging, a little vagueness in his comments, because there's not quite the specifics, because Erik Spoelstra was never going to give everything away. But the fact that they're making the offense a priority and that he's gone so far as to say so, no more of the cliched, we're in the mud, no more of working on defense. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do here. That's what Heat culture is defined by, etc. Like, I'm sure that's all part of it. And I'm sure there's somewhere.
Yeah, he did mention there, like, you got like a little one-liner. I didn't include it, but like, it's all connected. We got to make sure we're defending. And it's like, okay, got it.
Right. I know. Yeah. Sad. Erik Spoelstra's inner child is weeping at not being able to focus primarily on defense. But at the same time, the idea that they are conscious and aware of having to juice up an offense that was so ugly and slow and inefficient for most of last season. So I'm glad that it's made a priority. We've talked about it when we were looking at our media day comments, and the idea that they're being more, to use Spo's word, intentional at generating these open looks. It's fantastic news for Heat fans.
Yeah, I mean, we even heard from Duncan Robinson on Media Day. We're tired of being in the bottom third on offense. So it has been a theme based on no matter who you talk to. And so that makes me think, okay, this is something they are talking about behind the scenes, at practice, in the film sessions, all these things as they're kind of gearing up for this season. And I think it's going to be a big part of what this training camp is. No matter how much Erik Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler, look, obviously defense is going to be part of it. That's the job, right? You take care of two ends of the court, and they go out of their way to make that clear. They haven't taken care of the offensive end of the court, though, for 2 seasons now. They've ranked in the bottom 10 in offensive rating. Defense is not the problem with this group, and it won't be. As long as you got Bam, Spo, Jimmy Butler, defense is not going to be an issue with this group. This team can just walk into a top 10 defense every single year. And I don't mean to overlook how much work goes into that side and all the intentionality that goes along with that. Now I'm talking like Erik Spoelstra, but they need, if you got a pie of how much work is being divvied up on one end of the court, they better be dedicating most of that pie to the offensive side, because that's the side that needs it more, right? Yeah, like a 70-30 at the very least here. So there are a little couple things there, because you say, like, Spo, vague as he always is, but not as vague as Erik Spoelstra can sometimes be, right? Like he says, like, hey, 2 things we're working on: better quality looks, being hard to guard. And he's talking about we need to get more open shots. And you kind of dive into the numbers here. We talked about how the Heat ranked at the top of the league in mid-range shooting frequency. They ranked 18th in 3-point attempts per game, in the middle of the league when you kind of take into consideration pace and everything. They're more like 15th. Spoelstra last season routinely mentioned that the Heat wanted to take closer to 40 3-pointers a game. So this stuff about increasing the 3-point rate isn't new, but they only averaged 33.7 last season. Not good enough. And really, just taking the threes, as Spoelstra was talking about, isn't enough, right? You don't want to just be taking threes for the sake of taking threes, and that's why he talks about generating more open looks. You got to get the good ones. You got to get good quality looks, because not everybody on this team is Duncan Robinson or Tyler Hero, who can just fire off from 30 feet. And so, according to NBA's tracking data, and they have a database of all this stuff, Miami ranked 15th in open 3-point attempts, and that's defined as the closest defender being 4 to 6 feet away. So 15th, middle of the league. Not bad, could be better. They ranked 28th in wide open attempts per game, when the closest defender was 6 feet or more away. And so this is just simply not a team, even by the stats, that was generating a lot of open or wide open looks. That, to me, when we talk about 3-point shooting, that's the focus. It's not just getting up the volume. I think we talk way too much about that. It's actually generating the looks that lead to that volume, because as we've seen, when you've got guys closing out on these shooters, everybody on this team now, Duncan Robinson now included, like everybody on this team now can put the ball on the floor and attack that closeout, and they've kind of been trained to do that. But if that closeout isn't tight and that shot is open, we know they're going to take it. It's just about finding and generating more of those open shots, and how they do that, I guess, is the biggest question.
Yeah, but I also think if you're starting to think of the Heat preseason as kind of a mosaic, obviously you look in at the details and you can't quite tell what is going on. But as you kind of pan out further and further, we're starting to get little glimpses from everybody, not just Spo's comments today. Tyler here on Media Day talking about working more off ball. Bam Adebayo telling friend of the program, Brendan Tobin, that he wants to take up at least 100 3-point shots. Jimmy's quote that we'll get to a little bit later. The idea that you want to be able to take more 3-point shots, off ball movement, talking about Khalil Ware, which he told you in our exclusive interview, how he is going to be more of a rim runner, a guy that gets the kind of open looks at the rim, using his length and size. Like, we're starting to see dimensions of this kind of mosaic flesh out and get more crystallized and clear as we're getting deeper into this preseason. Now, obviously, this isn't a game, and we're not sure exactly how that's going to be manifesting, but we're starting to see glimpses, though. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. I think we're starting to see the idea that they want to be a much more dynamic offense that they've been, and that being the case, that's great. The combination of all those things, and that's certainly possible, I think is what's going to be making this offense much more effective and difficult to guard, to Erik Spoelstra's points. It's about getting multiple looks in multiple ways so that you throw the defense off and you can generate these kind of open looks, especially from the perimeter, so that you can knock them down with high intent and frequency and be able to generate offense more easily. So
But how do they do that? I guess it's fun to talk about that, right? And then it's another thing. Okay, what does the scheme look like? Like, what are we actually talking about here? So the way that the Heat generated most of their 3-point attempts, like in the bubble, the early part of the Jimmy Butler years, was a lot of dribble handoffs, a lot of those pistol action sets, those hit aheads early in the shot clock, in transition. But you really think about Bam Adebayo sort of on the perimeter, dribble handoffs to Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and all that kind of stuff. A little bit of dribble drive stuff with Goran Dragic, Jimmy Butler when he was obviously younger, Kendrick Nunn early in that era, getting into the basket and kicking out the shooters. That stuff has mostly went away over the last couple of years. And instead of Bam facilitating as a hub on offense on the perimeter, he's gotten a lot more accustomed to being in the low post. Bam was in the top 3 last year in just post-ups, just being in that spot with the ball in his hands. And that was intentional. That was a part of the new scheme. Erik Spoelstra decided, hey, we can't do the dribble handoff stuff anymore. Teams have scouted it. It doesn't work for us the way we need it to work. Let's go a little bit more inside out. And so he had Bam and Jimmy essentially staggered throughout all the 48-minute game. We're always going to have one of them on the court, and we're going to play through those guys. And we're going to put those guys near the basket. They're going to suck in the defense, and then they're going to spray out to whatever shooters are out there. And that didn't work. For a lot of different reasons, it didn't work. And it feels like maybe Erik Spoelstra has decided it doesn't work. We can't keep doing that anymore after about a year and a half of doing that. And so what does it look like now? I think is going to be an interesting thing to watch. And we talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show, but I do have some ideas. We'll get into all that later on. Plus, Jimmy Butler had his own comments about three-point shooting, and he actually said he doesn't need to be taking more threes next season. And David, I think he has a point. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season. The season hasn't started yet, right? No, not in Miami. It hasn't. There's no NFL season. I don't know what anybody's talking about. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, and it's America's #1 sports book for so many reasons. You know, sometimes in the middle of the game, you get a hunch. You want to check out the latest stats from around the other games around the league. You can view live play-by-play, and there's so much more. And guess what? You can do it all on the same page where you place your bets, and you'll get started right now with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first bet with just $5. That's right. Just a $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's over at FanDuel.com. Make sure to go today to FanDuel.com and get started. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. I want to invite you all to the exclusive Locked On Heat Insider community. If you want to join, there's a link in the show notes on YouTube and in the podcast description. If you join, you're going to get a bunch of cool stuff, exclusive content, insider info from us, and our reporting on the ground, game notes, stats while we cover the games live, intel on moves and trades that could happen before the trade deadline, and the best of all, the chance to talk to us one-on-one through the subtext messaging platform. So this is the best way to become a Locked On Heat lifer. If you want to join, you could sign up with the link in the show notes. It's free for 14 days. After that, it's $4.99 a month. You can cancel at any time, no worries. But we're really excited for this chance to connect with you all. Let's go to this Jimmy Butler quote, who, after today at training camp, was also asked about increasing his rate of three-point shooting. And he said, quote, "I'm not going to go out there and jack up 1,000 threes. I don't think anybody else is either. We're going to play basketball the right way, and we're going to win games no matter what anybody thinks." A reporter then followed up by asking if it's a concern that the Heat's best scorers tend to take shots from the same general area, the mid-range stuff that we were talking about before, David. And Jimmy Butler pushed back, said, quote, "I think we're fine. I believe that even if we all end up in the same spot, ain't nobody going to want to guard us anyway," end quote. Thoughts on what Jimmy Butler had to say about the three-point shooting?
I'm a little curious. I don't know what he means by not wanting. I mean, I don't think the expectation was ever that he was going to be a high-volume three-point shooter, but I think we can hear Jimmy say that at the same time. If he's feeling it within the context of a game, I think he's more than willing to let it fly. I think last season kind of showed that. Maybe he's just kind of, again, doesn't want to reveal too much. After being with the Heat for 5 seasons now, he probably has learned how to be very secretive about his plans on offense and things of that sort. So maybe that's reading into it a little bit too much. But I don't think he goes into every game with like a set plan of like, oh, I'm going to put up 4 threes or not. But I think if the defense allows it, and I think last season certainly showed that he's willing to take those shots and he could hit them at a higher rate. And I think it's something that he's continued to work on over the offseason as well. So I don't know. I don't read too much into it because I think the three-point shot's going to be there for Jimmy, and I think he's going to take them when he's allowed to.
It's probably wise not to read much into it because last year I remember asking him at training camp in Boca Raton, point blank, "Are you going to take more threes this year?" And he said no. He just said no, period. And then what happened?
That's not my game, right?
He averaged the most threes he ever has in a Miami Heat uniform, so a little bit more than 2 per game. So look, nobody's going to mistake Jimmy Butler for Steph Curry out there. Nobody ever is going to. But he even did increase his volume from three-point range a little bit more last year. I think that's just bound to happen as you get older as a player. We see this happen with LeBron James. Jimmy Butler, 35 years old in September. He's going to just take more threes. It reduces the wear and tear on the body. It's going to be a thing. But I don't expect him, to his point, to be taking a bunch. I don't think he's going to take 5 a game. He probably won't double it. He's probably going to be right around 2.5 to 3 per game. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be taking them. He's not a good three-point shooter. I know there's a stretch where he's like averaging like 50% or whatever. The guy has a very slow shooting form. He's basically stand still from the perimeter. I don't want him taking a bunch of threes. If we like what we're talking about with what Erik Spoelstra said about how do we generate open looks, Jimmy Butler is Miami's primary advantage creator. He is the guy who more than anybody else on this roster by far can apply the most pressure by the basket on offense. When he applies pressure, defenses have to double, and then he can spray out the shooters. I don't need Jimmy Butler taking threes. I need him creating threes. That's the point here. And last year, far too often, he wasn't doing that either, right? More of his field goals than any other year last year were assisted. That means that he was the one. The offense wasn't flowing through Jimmy Butler. It was going to Jimmy Butler more than ever. That can't be the case anymore. The offense has to go through Jimmy Butler. And if that's and that's why also, by the way, I think you saw an increase in his 3-point shooting rate last year is because he's standing there out in the perimeter wide open because nobody's guarding him. And then Bam or Duncan or Tyler Hero or Terry Rozier or whoever just kicks out to him, which is cool to get to every once in a while. But that should not be the primary function of the offense. And it shouldn't be Jimmy Butler's primary role in the offense. His job, if he's engaged and playing like the superstar that he is creating that advantage in the paint, drawing the defense in, and creating those open looks that Erik Spoelstra was talking about.
Jimmy's level of engagement notwithstanding, do you still think that's the best form of offense for Miami is to go through Jimmy so much? Or is it time to kind of make that shift to you've got your point, you've got your de facto guards in Tyler and Terry Rozier. You've got a once upon a time hub in Bam and Adebayo. You've got Niko Jovic with his passing skills, et cetera, who I think might likely emerge as a starter. But do you still think that the most efficient form of offense is going through Jimmy? Because it might be the most reliable. Like, I think if you're needing a bucket, you give the ball to Jimmy and let him go to work because he's Jimmy freaking Butler. But at the same time, I don't know that you want to do that on 90% of your possessions for an 82-game regular season.
Yeah, you don't. It is on a possession basis. It is the most efficient form of offense on any, like you just said, if you need a bucket, give it to Jimmy. He's either going to score or create a good look for one of his teammates. On a per possession basis, there is no question Jimmy Butler running the offense and doing what he's doing and creating an advantage that the rest of the offense could take that advantage of is easily the most efficient version of how the Heat can score. But you also can't be doing that for 82 games for 48 minutes over those 82 games. And that's why I think you will see a little bit more of an egalitarian style of offense. But my point is, I don't think we're ever going to see I don't think we'll see Jimmy Butler be James Harden or Luka Doncic, and nobody's asking him to be that. It's just when he does have the ball, to do more with it than just stand there, which just felt like he was a bystander in the offense for 90% of last year, So when it's not a matter of increasing the touches, it's being, doing more with the touches that he has.
You were going to say intentional.
I almost did it. Why?
You were going to go intentional.
It's
Erik Spoelstra.
We haven't heard from Erik Spoelstra for months, and now I hear him from like 3 days straight. I'm just like, I got spoisms just bouncing around in my brain.
How many intention bombs has he dropped already in 3 days of action? Like being in front of media, I'm sure he's probably said it at least 6 or 7 times. Yeah, I know. It gets to that point where you even did it. I think during Duncan's our interview with Duncan at media.
Oh, I said it to Duncan. Oh, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you said, and you even kind of called it out. You're like, I'm starting to sound like Spo now. Oh, but yeah, I think it's starting to kind of just permeate through everything here. Intentionality.
Covering this team too long. I gotta go. That's fair. I think maybe intentionality is the buzzword here. But what did you think to your own question though? Like in terms of, like, do you think Jimmy Butler, like, should Jimmy Butler's? I guess the question is, should Jimmy Butler's primary goal, at least when he's on offense, should it be like longevity, which I suppose would look a little bit more like it did last year, taking a few more threes, reduce the wear and tear on the body, and kind of be a little bit more of a guy who's just a cog in the offense and not like a primary driver of offense? Or do you think for his goals and the Heat's goals, do you think they just need more of Jimmy Butler just doing all-star stuff?
Not a great answer, perhaps, but I think it's a mix. But I also think that he's probably better served as your secondary or maybe even tertiary offense, because it's just, even at this point, it's with Jimmy holding the ball and looking to create his score. I don't think he's going to get that friendly whistle because I think the officiating has changed, and I don't think it's turning back to what it was. And I don't think he's getting to the line nearly as much at this stage in his career as he was 2 seasons ago. So I think that's going to change. And so if he can't rely on that being, just again, to his, what is it he always says? He likes the grind. He likes the bump players. Yeah, exactly. He likes to be able to draw, be physical, et cetera, draw fouls. But I just don't think that's realistic either. So he cannot be that kind of slow, plodding, trying to find those seams and then get that bailout call. That's just, it hasn't worked. That's the mud. That's the offense that we've seen over the last couple of seasons, unless he's like attacking with such fury and purpose and being able to hit.
That is the difference.
Such a wide variety of shots.
I always make that point. Like, I know when Jimmy Butler's engaged, when he's not doing the dribble 6 times kind of just herky jerky thing. Like, I know when Jimmy Butler's engaged when it's 2 dribbles and then he jumps into the guy and does that kind of leaning forward with the right hand kind of push shot. That's the Jimmy Butler's here tonight shot. When he sees that, no, that's the specific shot. Even that one, when I see that in the first quarter, I'm like, oh, this is going to be one of the Jimmy's here kind of nights, like Jimmy's here to play kind of nights. I just think more of that, just being a point guard, he doesn't necessarily need to score a ton of points, but putting the ball on the floor, 2 hard dribbles, get into the basket, get into the rim.
It was time of possession on shots last year. Like, I wonder how much time he took, because it was probably too much. You know, I know we could probably get into those numbers later, but again, being able to get those shots in maybe half as much time, that would certainly help. And again, if you're going to miss those shots, I understand that you don't want to, but sometimes you'll hit them and sometimes you'll get a foul call because you're Jimmy and you've earned them in the past. And so you also have to trust your rebounders, and that's where it comes. I'd like to see lineups with him and him and Jovic, him and Love. Like, those guys are solid rebounders. I know Jovic is still a work in progress in that regard, but use your height, use your size. That's now a weapon you didn't have. I could see multiple lineups there with Jimmy kind of being that attacker and saying, you know what, 5 seconds or less, Jimmy, in terms of being able to generate that offense and letting those guys down low secure the rebounds so that you can generate another look and another possession, because I think that's certainly going to help in the long term. So,
and it's not even necessarily, I'm sorry, but it's not even necessarily like scoring in those situations, but just getting into the paint, getting deep into the paint, which is what the Heat had such a hard time doing last year. And then if that shot isn't there because that second defender slides over, then that means somebody's open. And that's the thing that, like, when Tyler Hero dribble drives into the paint, he's not getting as deep as Jimmy Butler. Terry Rozier's not getting as deep as Jimmy Butler and not applying the same kind of pressure, because it takes 2 people to guard Jimmy Butler when he gets there. You could still guard Terry Rozier, depending on the defender, with 1 guy at the basket, right? Because of just the difference in size. Bam Adebayo doesn't get to, he doesn't have the handle to get that deep into the basket. He needs somebody to assist him, right? Like, I like Bam Adebayo getting shots at the rim because that means they're running pick and roll and getting lobs.
Yeah. No, I just going to say, I was just going to say, I'm hoping that with the increase in 3-point shooting, we'll see a lot more of his face-up game too. Like, because I want to see those things. Like, we're teased every offseason when we see him doing his off-season workouts and training locally and things of that sort. And it's like, it's so great. And you hear Michael Beasley say that, you know, Bam's the only guy who can beat him in one-on-one situations, etc. Like, I mean, I know this is kind of all apocryphal at this point, but just the idea of Bam being able to just get a look like that, put the ball down, and just yam it on somebody as he gets to the rim. Like, we know that's something he's capable of, and I'm hoping the 3-point shooting and the spacing that he is likely to bring to the table this year will open up some of that offense so we can create some additional looks too. But just clear out the floor, let Bam go to work from beyond the perimeter. Like, that's not too much to ask. I think it's a possibility.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. How do we expect the Heat's offense to look next season? How is it going to evolve? Why focusing on 3-point shooting actually might be overlooking the biggest problem of the Heat's offense from last year. We're going to talk about all of that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time and their new feature, Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Let's say you're in town somewhere and you're visiting and you want to go catch a ball game, or you want to go catch a comedy show or a concert, anything. Guess what? You just go to Game Time, and with our new feature, you can find those tickets so much more quickly than ever before. And again, there's always the great features that you've come to get used to when it comes to Game Time. They're all in pricing, lets you know right up front the total that you're going to be paying for, so there are no hidden fees at checkout. No worry about how much something is going to cost. You know right away how much those tickets are going to cost. Check out their seat views, check out their lowest price guarantee, and their Game Time ticket coverage, so you can get up to the minute best pricing on all the tickets that you're looking for. Take the guesswork out of having tickets. Buy tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms to apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Let us know in the comments section, do you think Jimmy Butler should be taking more threes next year? But beyond the three-point shooting, and so many of the questions, like we talked about earlier, to Erik Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler, a bunch of the guys on the team, do you need to take more threes? Do you need to take more threes? How can you guys get more threes? And I think we're overlooking maybe the biggest problem for Miami's offense last year, and that was shots at the basket. The Heat were first in mid-range shooting frequency. They were about in the middle of the league in three-point shooting frequency. They were 28th at shots at the rim. That just doesn't work. And I was looking at the numbers today, David. So even if you're above league average at mid-range shooting, right? League average last year was about 44% for mid-range. The Heat were slightly better than that. They were right around that. So let's just call it 44%. League average at the rim was 66%. I don't know how many people know this, and this might be too much advanced stats, but mid-range shots and shots at the rim are both worth 2 points. They're worth the same. And yet from one area of the court, you're shooting 44% on league average. And from the other part, you're shooting 66%. So just do the math. 100 possessions at 44%, you're scoring 88 points. At the rim, 100 possessions, you're scoring 100 and what's 66 times 2? 112? 112 points. No?
No.
122 points.
124. Oh, wait, no. 66? 132, excuse me.
132 points. That's way more points. And so, and I'm leaving out the three-point shooting thing because obviously that's the best, because that's worth another point. So just in terms of 2-pointers. And I think because the Heat were so over-indexed on mid-range shots and so close to the bottom of the league at rim attempts, it's no wonder that they are just continue to be in the bottom 10 in offense. Again, without getting into the math too much here, I don't need to do the whole formula in front of people, but it's basically impossible to be a top 15 offense with the Heat's shot profile from last year. And when I say basically impossible, I mean impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. You can have 5 Michael Jordans on your team in their prime, shooting all those mid-range shots. You're still going to have one of the worst 10 offenses in the league. Those are facts. So when we talk about Miami's biggest problem from last year, to me, the three-point shooting, you can get away with being a middling three-point shooting team in terms of frequency. The Pacers last year, top 2 in offense, 15th in three-point shooting frequency. The Thunder, top 3 in offense last year, 16th in three-point shooting frequency. Miami's right there, 18th. The Pacers were 9th in three-point shooting percentage. Miami was 12th. Like, Miami's three-point shooting was actually fine when you get into the nuts and bolts of this. The problem was that so many of their 2-pointers were coming from the wrong areas. They need to get shots at the rim.
And they will.
How do you know that?
Because I think Terry Rozier is going to be spending a full season with Miami. I think Tyler's engaged. We've heard from Nico the Punisher how he's going to be using his size as a greater advantage this year.
Oh, jeez.
What, you're not buying it?
I just, like, you told me that they're going to get more shots on goal because Terry Rozier, who's been a below-average finisher for his entire career at the basket, then you gave me Tyler Hero, who's never gotten to the basket consistently, and I don't care about 12 pounds. Like, I don't expect him to all of a sudden be like Isaiah Thomas.
We talked about this the other day. If we were buying the weight gain, did you hear about Grayson Allen? He put on like 20-something pounds of muscle. Why can't
healthy?
Well,
is that like the opposite of Ozempic?
I don't know, but at the same time, like, why isn't Tyler doing whatever Grayson Allen's doing? Like, I mean, that shouldn't be that difficult. Like, I know we're talking about different body types and everything else, and I'm certainly not a trainer, but man, like, I want to hear that. Now that's a muscle watch that you can kind of buy into. You know, if you're saying, you know what, you showed up 30 pounds heavier than you did last year, I'm like, all right, that seems much more realistic. But anyway,
but if Tyler's going to be more off ball, then I don't expect him to be getting shots at the rim necessarily as much. Again, Terry Rozier has been a below average.
Why not that Dwayne Wade backdoor cut package?
Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of it. But, like, you can't tell me that they're going to, because Terry Rozier for a full season, Tyler Hero gained 12 pounds, and Nikola Jovic posting up. Those aren't how you do it.
Khalil Ware.
So, but maybe in his 10 minutes per game, are you going to go from 28th to top 10?
Not necessarily, but it's a start, and it kind of opens up again those open looks that Spo was talking about in terms of generating better looks from the perimeter. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand, and I think you'll start to see it feed symbiotically with one another throughout the course of the season. It's an evolution. It's like, you know what? They're not as bad at the rim. You don't have to keep them away from there, and then they're able to knock down higher frequency shots from the perimeter and at a higher percentage. I think that's how it works out.
I'm kind of giving you a hard time on that stuff. You are right. Like it's committee, right? You can't ask one guy to just do all of it. And I think this is actually where the 3-point shooting gets looped in. This is how it's all related. If you're creating more space, then things aren't as jumbled in the paint anymore, and it's easier for Terry Rozier, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, whoever, Jaime Jaquez. Like, it's easier for all these guys to get to the rim more often if you're creating space. And I mean, we saw the Celtics last year with their 5-out offense. Get to the rim consistently because, defenders were just so spaced out. They couldn't help each other. They were on islands. And when you hear some of the stuff again, Erik Spoelstra, we have so many shot creators. I think that's what he's talking about. We have so many guys who could be good in one-on-one situations. You also heard Erik Spoelstra say, you got to look at who's been successful and you got to see what's worked for them. And he was also telling Brendan Tobin during their interview, he didn't watch the Celtics win the championship live, but he did the film work on the finals when it was all done. And I think he's going to see how the Celtics were that dominant offensively over a good Dallas Mavericks defense. And it was, okay, get these guys spread out on the floor and let them go to work on their little islands and just kind of let them do what they got to do. And yeah, you're going to have motion and all these things. You're going to have Jason Tatum in the middle of Boston's offense kind of facilitating and kind of being the point guard of that. That, I think, would be Jimmy Butler's role in Miami. Yeah. And then, or Bam Adebayo's role for that matter. I think him and Jaylen Brown, Butler and Bam could be very similar to what Tatum and Brown were for Boston's offense in terms of generating those looks. It's probably why you hear Tyler Hero talking about being off the ball, even though he's a guard. Like, Boston's guards primarily worked off the ball. I think you're going to see some of that too. I also made the comparison to Oklahoma City's offense. I think you could see some of that stuff in terms of drive, kick, nonstop until you find some sort of advantage. You get a little crease. And when you have guys who are as skilled with the ball in their hands, like Terry Rozier, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, they're going to take advantage of those creases. Jaime Jaquez. They're going to take advantage of those angles and those little couple inches of space that maybe weren't there last year. So I think we're going to see more of a perimeter-oriented offense from the Heat in terms of the stations that they set up in the half court, and then using that space to kind of get to the basket more often and use what it is that they do well. To go back to Erik Spoelstra's quote in the top, like, what do you say? Knowing how we could do that within what we do. Basically, how we can create more open looks within what we're already doing. And it's just kind of leaning into those strengths more.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I know some people want to be very they want to temper their expectations, and that's fine. It wasn't a very juicy offseason, no big splashes, no big names, no moves at all, really, other than the addition of Alec Burks and the loss of a couple of players. Yeah. And so I know it's not as exciting, and I know some people will say, oh, you're just supporting the team, and you're just kind of you're saying these things to garner favor with the Heat front office, which is patently ridiculous. That doesn't work. I could say anything on this show.
Accused of being Heat apologists now? I feel like we get accused.
Some people, we don't need to do that. Yeah. I do want to say, however, it is patently ridiculous. No media member curries favor that way at this point in time. Like, everybody's been critical of the Heat at some point or another. Look at Barry Jackson. I mean, Barry Jackson, he can't be more critical and taking digs at the front office and their pursuit of superstars than Barry has been from the Miami Herald. And his credentials aren't
talking about. Speaking as people who have covered the league for a long time too, I don't think front offices respect mouthpiece media members either. They respect if you are telling the truth, right? Like, they don't want hot takes. They don't want Stephen A. Smithing all over the place, but they do. Right. They do respect you if you have an opinion and if you're thoughtful about things. And I've talked to people on the Heat staff, on other staffs or other teams that I've covered. Like, they kind of do want to know what you think about things because we study stuff like they do, right? Like, We're watching the same games they're watching. We have a lot of the same intel. We have a lot of the same stuff, at least, to base that intel off of. So, all that being said, none of this means that the Heat are going to do any of this. It just means that they're trying to, I think, install this as their offense. And that, I think, is my best guess in terms of, because we have seen the Heat's offense evolve in the Jimmy Butler era, like we were talking about, from dribble handoffs, pistol actions, to more inverted out kind of three-point shooting, all this stuff, to the mid-range things, to the posting up last year, all that stuff. We have seen them change offense for various different reasons. I think the reason they did it last year, if people are wondering, well, why didn't you just do all this last season? Well, a few reasons. You didn't have Terry Rozier on the roster. You instead had Kyle Lowry. I also think, based on the 2023, actually, I know this for a fact, what the Heat were talking about coming off of the 2023 finals was that they weren't good enough in isolation, that they needed to be better as in one-on-one situations. And so they tilted their offense in that way. Hey, Bam, you got to be better one-on-one. Jimmy, we need you to do more one-on-one. He didn't do that. Maybe the offense looks different last year if Jimmy's just more engaged, and maybe it looks way better than 21st. I've argued all season that it would. But they've obviously come to the conclusion that that's not going to work anymore. And it is a copycat league. And I think you see the top offenses in the league, Celtics, Pacers, Thunder last year. They didn't operate that way necessarily. They did get their guys in isolation. They did get their guys in one-on-one, but they didn't do it necessarily inside out. They did it from outside in. And I think we're going to see the Heat go back to something that they kind of started in a lot of ways back in that bubble run in kind of that outside in offense. So we'll see how it looks, man. Like I said, much harder done than said. Much easier said than done.
Sure.
Could go either way, I guess. They're going to be intentional about it. They're going to be intentional about it. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.